The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, translated and abridged by Lowell Bear. 1956, copyright Bantam Books. I'm starting with chapter 25. The next day, toward 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a carriage drawn by two magnificent English horses stopped before the Count of Monte Cristo's door. In it was a man wearing a blue coat with silk buttons of the same color, brown trousers, and a white vest crossed by an enormous gold chain. His hair was so black and hung down so far over his forehead that it hardly seemed natural, for it was completely out of keeping with the deep wrinkles it failed to conceal. He was, in short, a man of 50 or 55, who tried to appear 40. Putting his head through the window of his carriage, he sent his groom to ask whether the Count of Monte Cristo was at home. The groom knocked on the porter's window and asked, "Is this the Count of Monte Cristo's residence?" "His Excellency lives here, but he's engaged now," replied the porter. "In that case, here's the card of my master, Baron Danglars. Please take it to the Count of Monte Cristo, and tell him that the Baron stopped on his way to the chamber in order to have the honor of seeing him. I don't speak to His Excellency, but his valet will deliver the message." The groom returned to the carriage and reported the answer he had been given. "He must be a prince, then, this man they call His Excellency, and to whom no one but his valet has a right to speak," said Danglars. "But that's all right. Since he has a credit opened with me, he'll have to see me when he needs money." He sat back in his carriage and called out to the coachman so loudly that he could be heard on the other side of the street, "To the Chamber of Deputies." Monte Cristo, who had been notified of the Baron's visit in time to see him, had been studying him from behind a window blind with the aid of a pair of powerful binoculars. "Ali," he called out, striking a copper gong. Ali appeared. "Call Bertuccio," said Monte Cristo. Bertuccio entered at almost the same moment. "Did your Excellency wish to see me?" he asked. "Yes." "Did you see the horses that stopped in front of my door just now?" "Certainly, your Excellency. They're extremely handsome horses." "Why is it," said Monte Cristo, frowning, "that when I've asked you to get me the two finest horses in Paris, there are two horses in Paris as handsome as mine, and yet they're not in my stable?" On seeing the Count's frown and hearing the stern intonation of his voice, Ali bowed his head. "It's not your fault, Ali," said the Count in Arabic, with a gentleness which one would not have expected to find either in his voice or on his face. "You know everything about English horses." Ali's features took on their look of serenity once again. "Your Excellency," said Bertuccio, "the horses you mentioned weren't for sale." Monte Cristo shrugged and said, "Don't you know that anything is for sale to a man who's willing to pay the price?" "Monsieur Danglars paid 16,000 francs for them, sir." "Well, then you should have offered him 32,000. He's a banker, and a banker would never miss a chance to double his capital." "Are you speaking seriously, sir?" asked Bertuccio. Monte Cristo looked at him as though astonished that he should ask such a question. "I have a call to make at 5 o'clock this afternoon," he said. "I wish to have those horses harnessed to my carriage and waiting for me then." "May I point out to your Excellency that it's now 2 o'clock?" said Bertuccio timidly. "I know," was the Count of Monte Cristo's only reply. At 5 o'clock, the Count struck his gong 3 times. 1 stroke was for Ali, 2 for Baptistin, and 3 for Bertuccio. The steward entered. "My horses?" said Monte Cristo. "They're harnessed to your carriage, sir." The Count went outside and saw the horses he had admired in front of Danglars' carriage 3 hours earlier. "They're really handsome horses," he said. "You were right to buy them, although you were a little late." I had great difficulty getting them, sir, said Bertuccio, and I had to pay a very high price for them. Are they any less handsome because of that? Asked the Count, shrugging his shoulders. Bertuccio turned to go away. Wait, said Monte Cristo, stopping him. I also need an estate on the sea-coast, in Normandy, for example, between Le Havre and Boulogne. I have a small harbor which my corvette can enter. It must be a small harbor which my corvette can enter. She draws only 15 feet of water. The ship must always be ready to put to sea, no matter what hour of the day or night I give the order. Make inquiries about such an estate, and when you hear of one, go to see it. If you're satisfied with it, buy it in your own name. The corvette is on her way to Fécamp now, isn't she? I saw her put to sea the same evening we left Marseille. And the yacht? She's at Martigues. Very well. Correspond with the two captains from time to time to make sure they don't go to sleep. The Count climbed into his carriage and ordered his coachman to drive to the residence of Baron Danglars. The Baron's white and gold salon was well known on the Rue de Chaussée-d'Antin. It was there that he had his visitor shown on his arrival, in order to dazzle him right from the start. "Have I the honor of addressing Monsieur de Monte Cristo?" asked the Baron when he entered. "And have I the honor of addressing Baron Danglars, Chevalier of the Legion of Honor, and member of the Chamber of Deputies?" The Count was repeating the titles he had read on the Baron's card. Danglars felt the thrust and bit his lip. "I've received a letter from the firm of Thompson and French," said Danglars, "but I must admit that its meaning isn't very clear to me. In fact, I came by your house today to ask you to explain it to me." "I'm listening, and I'll be glad to help you. I have the letter right here," said Danglars, drawing it from his pocket. "It opens an unlimited credit for you with my firm." "Well, Baron, what's obscure about that?" "Nothing. But the word unlimited? Do you think the firm of Thompson and French isn't perfectly reliable?" replied Danglars with an almost mocking smile. "But in financial matters, the word unlimited is so vague. Vagueness is doubtfulness, and the wise man will stay away from doubtful things. Let me try to make myself clear by asking you to name the sum you expect to draw on me. The reason I opened an unlimited credit with you is precisely that I don't know how much money I will need." The banker leaned back in his chair with a heavy, arrogant smile and said, "Oh, don't be afraid to ask. You may be sure that my funds, limited though they may be, are sufficient to meet the highest demands. And even if you were to ask for 1,000,000. "Pardon?" "I said 1,000,000, repeated Danglars with the same self-assurance of stupidity. "But what would 1,000,000 do me?" said the Count. "If I needed only 1,000,000, I wouldn't have bothered opening a credit for such a trifling sum. Why, I always carry at least that much with me." So saying, he drew from his card case 2 treasury bonds for 500,000 francs each. A man like Danglars must be bludgeoned, not merely pricked, and his blow had its effect. He stared at Monte Cristo in a daze. "Come now, admit that you mistrust the firm of Thompson and French," continued the Count. "I allowed for that possibility, and although I don't know much about business, I took my precautions. Here are 2 letters like the one that was sent to you. One is from the firm of Arnstein and Escalez of Vienna, opening an unlimited credit for me with Baron de Rothschild. The other is from Baring of London, and is addressed to Monsieur Lafitte." That was the coup de grâce. Danglars was vanquished. He opened the 2 letters with trembling hands and verified the signatures with a scrupulousness which would have been insulting to the Count of Monte Cristo if he had not been aware of the banker's bewilderment. "Here are 3 signatures which are worth many millions," said Danglars, standing up as though to pay tribute to the power of gold personified in the man sitting before him. 3 unlimited credits. "Excuse me, Count, but while I'm no longer mistrustful, I'm still astonished." "Well, then," said Monte Cristo, "now that we understand each other, now that there's no longer any mistrust between us, shall we say, fix an approximate sum for the first year, say 6 million, for example?" "Very well, 6 million," said Danglars, hoarsely. The Count stood up. "I must confess one thing to you, Count," said Danglars. "I thought I was rather well acquainted with all the large fortunes of Europe, yet yours was completely unknown to me. Is it of recent date?" "No, on the contrary, it's very old. It's a sort of family treasure which it was forbidden to touch, and which was tripled by the accumulation of interest. The period fixed by the testator expired only a few years ago, so your ignorance was quite natural. You'll learn more about it in a short time." He accompanied those words with one of those pale smiles which had so frightened France d'Épinay. "Yes, that will be for later, when we know each other better," said Danglars. "For today, I'll content myself with presenting you to Madame Danglars. Excuse my eagerness, Count, but a client like you is almost part of the family." Monte Cristo bowed as a sign that he accepted the honor. Danglars rang, and a servant appeared. "Is the Baroness at home?" asked Danglars. "Yes, sir." "Is she alone?" "No, Madame has company." "And who is Madame's company?" "Monsieur Debray?" asked Danglars with a joviality that made Monte Cristo smile inwardly, for he was already acquainted with the banker's transparent family secrets. "Yes, it's Monsieur Debray," replied the servant. Danglars nodded. Turning to Monte Cristo, he said, "Monsieur Debray is an old friend of ours and is secretary to the Minister of the Interior. As for my wife, she lowered herself by marrying me, for she comes from an ancient family. She was Mademoiselle de Servières, and later widow of the Marquis of Narbonne. I haven't had the honor of meeting Madame Danglars, but I've already met Monsieur Lucien Debray." "Where was that?" "At Monsieur Albert de Morcerf's house." "Ah, you know the young Viscount?" "We were in Rome together during the Carnival." "Oh, yes. I think I heard about some strange adventure of his with bandits, some sort of miraculous escape. I believe he told my wife and daughter about it when he returned from Italy." "The Baroness awaits you, gentlemen," said the servant, entering the room once again. "Allow me to show you the way," said Danglars to the Count of Monte Cristo. Madame Danglars, whose beauty was still outstanding, despite her 36 years, was at her piano, while Lucien Debray sat looking through an album. Debray had already had time to tell the Baroness quite a number of things about the Count. Her curiosity, aroused by both Albert's stories and the new details brought to her by Lucien, was now at its height. She therefore received her husband with a smile, which was contrary to her custom, and gave the Count a ceremonious yet gracious bow. Debray exchanged a familiar, semi-familiar greeting with the Count, and an intimate one with Danglars. "Allow me to introduce the Count of Monte Cristo," said Danglars. "I will say only one thing about him which will make him a great favorite of our fair ladies. He has come to Paris with the intention of staying here for a year and spending 6 million francs during that time, which means that we may expect a series of balls, dinners, and supper parties." You've chosen a very bad time to come, said Madame Danglars. Paris is detestable in summer. There are no balls, receptions, or banquets. The Italian opera is in London, and the French opera is everywhere except Paris. Our only entertainment consists of a few wretched horse races at the Champ de Mars and Sartory. Do you like horses, Count? I spent a good part of my life in the Orient, madam. And as you know, the Orientals appreciate only two things in this world: the nobility of horses and the beauty of women. Just then, Madame Danglars' confidential maid entered and whispered a few words into her mistress's ear. The Baroness turned pale and said, "Impossible." Then, turning to her husband, she said, "Is what my maid tells me true?" "What has she told you?" asked Danglars, visibly agitated. "She says that when my coachman went to harness my horses to my carriage, he found that they weren't in the stable. May I ask what that means?" "Listen to me," said Danglars. "Oh, I'll listen to you, because I'm very curious to hear what you're going to tell me. I'll ask these gentlemen to be our judges, and I'll begin by telling them the facts. Gentlemen, Baron Danglars has 10 horses in his stable. 2 of them are mine. They are magnificent horses, the finest in Paris. You know them, Monsieur Debray, my dappled grays. Now, just when I'm about to lend my carriage to Madame de Villefort to go to the Bois de Boulogne tomorrow, these 2 horses are nowhere to be found. Monsieur Danglars has no doubt managed to make a few thousand francs on them and sold them. Ah, what an abominable breed the speculators are." "My dear, those horses were too spirited," said Danglars. "They were only 4 years old, and they made me terribly frightened for your sake. I'll find you other horses like them, even finer if there are any. But they'll be calm, gentle horses, which won't inspire me with such terror." The Baroness shrugged her shoulders with an air of profound contempt. "My God!" exclaimed Debray. "Unless I'm mistaken, I see your horses harnessed in the Count's carriage."